So, um, think about your front door for a second. When you walk out of your house, you probably don't realize that you're, like, stepping onto a game board.
Right, a game board where the rules were written, well, 100 years ago by people you've never met.
Exactly. And those invisible rules, they completely dictate whether you'll walk, whether you'll drive, how healthy you'll be. It even dictates what your brain literally chooses to see and not see on the street.
It really does. And today we're looking at a massive, it's a 68-page report from the International Transport Forum.
Yeah, and this thing exposes exactly how these invisible rules were written and, I mean, more importantly, how they are actively engineering our behavior today. Welcome to the Deep Dives, everyone.
Glad to be here. You know, that illusion of choice is really the first thing this data pulls apart, because we assume we're waking up and making these entirely free decisions about our daily mobility, right?
What? Like, I think I'll drive today.
Exactly. But the reality is that the physical spaces we navigate, they've already made the vast majority of those choices for us. And they often prioritize the movement of two-ton machines over human beings.
Which is wild when you really step back and look at it.
It is. So the International Transport Forum, which, by the way, acts as a global platform for transport policy across 66 member countries, they argue that we have to fundamentally redesign our cities.
And they base this on 4 core pillars, right?
Yeah, 4 pillars: efficiency, environment, enjoyment, and equity.
Okay, let's unpack this, because I want to start with that first pillar, efficiency. We naturally assume that moving faster requires a motor. Like, if you want to get across town efficiently, you drive.
That's the baseline assumption.
Right. And we even tend to look at the electric car as the ultimate green machine, like the absolute peak of modern travel efficiency. But this report looks at the human body and basically says, wait a minute, the human body on a bicycle is essentially the most efficient hybrid engine ever created.
The math they provide to back that up is staggering. I mean, if we look at energy consumption, an average electric car uses about 150 watt-hours of energy per kilometer.
Okay.
Walking uses 15 times less energy than that electric car. But a traditional bicycle, it uses 27 times less energy.
Oh, wow. 27 times.
Yeah. And the report uses this fantastic term for it they call active travel modes convivial technologies.
Convivial technologies. That sounds like a fancy way of saying a friendly gadget. What does that actually mean? Mechanically?
Mechanically, it just means a technology that works as a mechanical amplifier for human exertion rather than a total replacement for it.
So you do the work and the machine just helps.
Exactly. You provide the baseline energy and the machine multiplies your output. But the efficiency here, it isn't just about watts and calories, it's about time.
Which is the ultimate currency.
Right.
Yeah.
We have this deep-seated, almost biological assumption that getting in a car means getting there faster. But the data from major urban cores completely contradicts this.
Wait, really?
Yeah. In places like London, Paris, Bogota, and Chicago, bicycles, which average around 18 kilometers per hour, and pedelecs, they are frequently matching or beating peak hour car speeds.
Wait, really quick, just to make sure we're all on the same page. What is a pedelec?
Ah, right. It's basically an e-bike. Specifically one where the small electric motor only kicks in to assist you when you are actively pedaling.
I gotcha.
And it caps out around 21 kilometers per hour. And because these bikes can, filter through congestion, utilize dedicated infrastructure, and take more direct routes, they frequently outpace cars sitting in gridlock.
So let me get this straight. You're sitting in traffic in a 2-ton metal box, draining a massive battery, and a person on a 20-pound bicycle utilizing a convivial technology just cruises right past you.
Cruising right past, getting to the office sooner.
That completely flips our understanding of urban speed. I mean, that's wild. But the report goes even further into a different kind of efficiency, right? Something called the square meter hour.
Yes. And this is perhaps the most eye-opening metric in the entire document, because we usually measure vehicle efficiency by miles per gallon or battery range.
Right, the usual specs.
But the square meter hour measures spatial footprint over time. It calculates not just how much physical space a vehicle consumes, but how long it monopolizes that space.
Okay, let's paint a picture of this for the listener, because this blew my mind.
Yeah.
Think about your neighborhood right now. Imagine if 80% of your living room was permanently taken up by a massive metal box.
Just sitting there.
just sitting there. And you only actually use it for maybe 45 minutes a day. You would go crazy. You'd throw the box out in a heartbeat.
You absolutely would.
But that is exactly what we've accepted on a citywide scale for our public spaces.
That is the perfect visualization. More than 80% of a personal vehicle's space usage over time is purely static. It is just sitting parked, doing absolutely nothing, consuming premium urban real estate.
It's just dead space.
Exactly. When you compare the square meter hour of a car to a pedestrian or a cyclist, the spatial inefficiency of the private automobile in a dense city is just astronomical.
Right, because of the geometry of it.
Right. A single car lane can move maybe 2,000 people an hour. A dedicated bike lane of the exact same width can move upwards of 10,000.
10,000. Which brings us to the next massive piece of this puzzle, which is the physical and environmental reality of making that swap.
The ROI, basically.
Right. Now, I have to push back on this a bit on behalf of everyone listening who might be skeptical. Because, look, I get the spatial math. I understand the climate argument.
Sure.
But let's look at the actual everyday experience. If I decide to bike to work tomorrow, aren't I just going to be aggressively inhaling tailpipe exhaust while simultaneously risking getting crushed by a delivery truck?
It's a very valid fear.
Right. Like, is the health benefit of getting my heart rate up really worth the very real physical dangers of the street?
That exact tension is what public health researchers measure using health impact assessments, or HIAs.
Okay, how do those work?
Well, they don't just look at the benefits of cardio in a vacuum. They explicitly pit the physical activity against the negative impacts you just mentioned.
The exhaust and the danger?
Exactly. Exposure to ambient air pollution and the statistical risk of traffic injuries.
And what does the math actually say when you put those head to head? Like, does the cardio win?
It completely dominates. Across 30 different major studies analyzed in the report, the median ratio was 9-to-1 in favor of active travel.
Wait, 9-to-1?
9-to-1, meaning the physiological benefits of the physical activity outweigh the negative impacts of pollution and crash risks by 9 times.
That is incredible.
And in certain cities with better infrastructure, it scales exponentially. In Rome, when they monetized the public health outcomes, the economic cost-benefit ratio for cycling was 70-to-1.
70-to-1. That is wild. But, I mean, how is that mathematically possible? Unless the baseline health of the population is just incredibly poor to begin with.
Well, you hit the nail on the head. This raises a crucial question about the global health baseline. The reason the physical benefits absolutely dwarf the street-level risks is because we are in the middle of an unprecedented inactivity crisis.
Just structurally, we don't move.
Right. Physical inactivity kills roughly 3.2 million people prematurely every single year. It costs the global economy $67.5 billion annually in healthcare costs and lost productivity.
And there is a deeply counterintuitive stat in the report regarding who is suffering the most from this. You would naturally assume the wealthiest nations, the ones with the best healthcare, would be the healthiest.
You would think.
But high-income countries actually have the highest rates of adult inactivity on Earth. Something like 36.8% of adults in high-income nations are insufficiently active. We've somehow managed to buy our way out of moving.
Well, we didn't just buy our way out, we engineered our way out.
How so?
After World War II, wealthy nations adopted Euclidean zoning, which legally separated residential areas from commercial areas.
Oh, right. Suburbia.
Exactly. We built vast suburban sprawls, we mandated massive parking lots, and we created drive-through culture. The built environment literally removed any practical necessity to use your body to acquire goods or services.
So the cardiovascular benefit of biking is so incredibly high, simply because our baseline movement has plummeted to almost zero.
That's exactly it.
And the environmental payoff is just as potent. I mean, the climate data here shows that swapping just one car trip for one bike trip per day for 200 days a year saves half a ton of CO2 over its life cycle.
Just from that one micro swap.
Yeah, that's about 7% of an average European's annual per capita emissions, just from biking to the grocery store instead of driving.
The cumulative potential of that is massive. But this is exactly where we have to pause and look at the whole picture.
Okay, what's the catch?
If the health and climate returns are this high, the obvious policy move is to just tell everyone, hey, get on a bike. The problem is these benefits do not apply equally. They are heavily dictated by your zip code and your income.
Ah, right. Let's talk about the Los Angeles study, because this really highlights the friction here. The researchers modeled what would happen if cycling increased by 50% across the entire LA region.
And the results were very split.
Super split. The wealthy, predominantly white neighborhoods saw massive public health benefits. But the low-income communities of color saw significantly fewer benefits. If the physical act of pedaling a bike is exactly the same, why is the biological outcome so drastically different?
Because of the physical environment they're pedaling through, historically, urban highways and industrial zones were intentionally routed through low-income neighborhoods.
So they're breathing worse air from day one.
Day one, those communities start with a drastically higher baseline of ambient air pollution. Furthermore, they severely lack dedicated, protected cycling infrastructure.
Right.
So when you increase cycling in those specific areas, the higher risk of crashes and the elevated intake of particulate matter eat heavily into the health benefits of the exercise.
It's like prescribing someone a daily jog for their cardiovascular health, but their only place to run is through an active, hazardous construction site.
That's a great analogy.
The physical act of running is happening, but the intense environmental stress and danger completely negate the health benefit you were trying to achieve in the first place.
That is exactly the dynamic, and it connects directly to a critical concept in the report, which is systemic violence.
Systemic violence. When transport planners talk about violence, they usually just mean car crashes, right?
Usually, yes. But the ITF report defines systemic violence much more broadly. It includes road traffic danger, absolutely, but also gender-based violence, criminal violence, and aggressive policing.
Because active travel inherently means physical exposure. You don't have doors locking around you. You are out in the open.
Precisely. If a street is poorly lit, if harassment is normalized, if traffic flies by at 60 miles an hour inches from the sidewalk, navigating that space requires immense mental and emotional taxation.
It's exhausting.
It is. If the social safety isn't guaranteed, anyone who can afford a car will just retreat into one. They will buy a metal box to protect themselves from a hostile environment. You cannot democratize active travel without addressing the systemic environmental violence that makes vulnerable populations feel unsafe in public space.
Oh. Okay, here's where it gets really interesting, though.
Yeah.
Why are our public spaces so hostile to pedestrians in the first place? The report argues this isn't some accidental oversight in urban design.
Not at all.
It's the result of an invisible cognitive bias that has shaped our cities for a century. They call it moto-normativity. How does the report define that?
Moto-normativity is the deep, unconscious assumption that private car travel is the default, normal, and preferred way to move. It is so hardwired into our culture that it causes us to accept levels of danger, pollution, and spatial inequality that we would never, ever tolerate in any other context.
And the psychological mechanism they mention for this is fascinating. It's something called normal bias or car blindness, where our brains literally filter out pedestrians.
The windshield perspective.
Exactly. If you are driving a car at 45 miles an hour, your brain has a hard bandwidth limit. To process the complex task of not crashing the car, the windshield becomes a screen where you only search for specific inputs.
Other cars, traffic lights, lane markers.
Right. Anything that isn't a car basically becomes background noise. You literally look right past a cyclist.
This is why, after a collision, drivers frequently say, in complete honesty, I looked, but I just didn't see them.
They really didn't.
No, it's a cognitive filtering failure. But the real danger is that car blindness scales up from the individual driver to the entire societal and political apparatus. We become completely numb to the negative impacts of cars while becoming hyper-vigilant about the negative impacts of anything that disrupts the car's dominance.
Oh, the e-scooter panic.
Yeah.
This is the perfect real-world example of that double standard.
Oh, absolutely.
A few years ago, in cities like Paris and Sydney, politicians and the media completely panicked over rental e-scooters. They were labeled an absolute menace. People claimed they were cluttering sidewalks, causing chaos, injuring pedestrians left and right.
It was a massive media frenzy.
It got to the point where Paris actually held a referendum and banned rental e-scooters entirely from the city. But the statistical reality of that panic is just mind-blowing.
What's fascinating here is how the data completely contradicts the public outrage. In Paris, small electric mobility devices, which includes all those rental e-scooters, cause less than 5% of injury-causing crashes.
Less than 5%.
Less than 5%. Meanwhile, large, four-wheeled vehicles and motorcycles cause the vast majority of all injuries. If we look at the European Union broadly, 65% of all road crash fatalities involve a car or a large motorized vehicle.
The hypocrisy is just staggering. We hold a 15-kilogram scooter traveling at 12 miles an hour to a standard of absolute flawless perfection.
Right, zero tolerance.
A scooter trips someone, it's front-page news, and we pass sweeping bans. Meanwhile, a 2-ton SUV kills a pedestrian, and we write it off as an unavoidable accident, and implicitly blame the pedestrian for wearing dark clothing or, looking at their phone.
The report explains this dynamic through the lens of a socio-technical transition.
Okay, what does that mean?
That's basically an academic way of describing what happens when a new technology doesn't just replace an old tool, but completely rewires society's rules, laws, and physical spaces to accommodate it. And the backlash we see against e-bikes and scooters today perfectly mirrors the backlash against cars 100 years ago.
This is a piece of history I think most people don't know. A century ago, people absolutely hated cars.
Oh, they despised them.
No.
In the 1910s and 1920s, cities viewed the automobile as a terrifying nuisance. Streets were considered public commons.
Like actual living spaces.
Exactly. There were spaces for walking, for commerce, for children to play. Cars were seen as dangerous toys for the wealthy that were invading public space and slaughtering pedestrians.
So how did cars take over?
To secure their place in the city, proponents of the automobile had to wage an aggressive public relations war. They literally invented the concept and the crime of jaywalking to shift the blame from the driver to the pedestrian.
I had no idea.
Yeah. It effectively legally pushed humans off the street to make room for machines.
Wow. And over a century, that campaign worked so well that the car achieved what the philosopher Ivan Illich called a radical monopoly, meaning the technology has monopolized our physical reality so completely that using it is no longer a choice, it's a requirement to participate in society.
Because if every grocery store, office building, and school in your town is surrounded by an ocean of asphalt and they're connected only by multi-lane highways, choosing not to drive means you are effectively excluded from economic and social life.
You literally can't participate.
Right. The built environment enforces the monopoly.
Which begs the ultimate question. If we are fundamentally trapped by this car-centric mindset, how do city planners actually break the loop? Because traditional urban planning seems to operate on a definition of insanity.
It really does.
It's like trying to clean out your junk drawer by buying a massive new filing cabinet. For a week, it feels incredibly spacious. But human nature hates empty space, so within a month, you've just accumulated more stuff, and the filing cabinet is overflowing again. Building more highway lanes to stop traffic congestion works the exact same way, right?
It does. That behavioral mechanism is called induced demand. When you build a new lane, you temporarily lower the cost of driving.
Cost meaning time, right?
Exactly. The time and hassle it takes to get somewhere. People immediately realize driving is faster, so they change their routes, switch from public transit back to cars, or decide to take trips they otherwise wouldn't have.
And boom, traffic is back.
The new lane fills up almost instantly. It is the fatal flaw in the traditional predict and provide planning model.
Walk us through predict and provide, because this is how almost every city in the world has been built for 50 years.
Under predict and provide, traffic engineers look at historical data. They predict that the demand for driving will inevitably go up, and then they provide more infrastructure like wider roads, larger intersections, to meet that specific prediction.
Sounds logical on paper.
Until you realize that providing the infrastructure induces the demand, creating more congestion, which then justifies predicting even more demand the very next year. It is a closed, self-fulfilling loop.
And the mathematical model they use to justify pouring billions of dollars into this loop is completely skewed toward privilege. And you're talking about cost-benefit analysis, or CBA.
Yes. Traditional cost-benefit analysis in transport engineering hinges on a metric called travel time savings.
Okay, how does that skew things?
Well, if a city proposes a massive highway expansion, the engineers calculate that it might save 10,000 drivers 2 minutes on their morning commute. The model then assigns a monetary value to those saved minutes. Crucially, because car drivers on average have higher incomes than people who rely on walking or transit, the driver's time is mathematically valued higher in the analysis.
Wait, so the algorithm literally dictates that shaving 2 minutes off the commute of a wealthy driver is fundamentally more economically valuable to society than, say, building a safe, protected crosswalk so a low-income family can access a grocery store without risking their lives.
That is exactly how the math shakes out.
That is insane. It prioritizes micro-savings in speed over fundamental spatial access.
And that systemic bias is exactly why the ITF report argues we have to completely abandon predict and provide and shift entirely to a decide and provide model. It's also known as vision-led planning.
Decide and provide, meaning we stop letting traffic algorithms dictate the future. We actually decide what kind of city we want to live in, and then we build the infrastructure to force that vision into reality.
Exactly. If a city decides its vision is zero traffic fatalities, clean air, and equitable access, it has to actively provide the space for that. And that means democratizing the street. You have to physically take space away from cars and reallocate it.
It's a zero-sum game with space.
It is. And a crucial point the report emphasizes is that when you reallocate that space, you have to explicitly decouple walking and cycling.
Oh, that's a vital distinction. We almost always lump them together in policy discussions, right? Pedestrians and cyclists, as if they're the exact same thing just because they don't have engines.
They share health benefits, but mechanically, they have completely different infrastructure needs. I mean, a pedestrian walking at 4 kilometers an hour and someone on an e-bike moving at 25 kilometers an hour do not belong in the same physical space.
That sounds like a recipe for disaster.
It is. If a city just paints a line on a sidewalk and forces pedestrians and fast-moving cyclists to fight over a tiny strip of concrete while cars enjoy 4 dedicated lanes, you just engineer conflict and danger between vulnerable users.
Right. And obviously you can't just mandate that everyone bike 25 miles from the deep suburbs to the city center every morning.
No, which is why Decide and Provide relies heavily on integrating active travel with high-quality collective transport.
Trains and buses.
Right. The vision is that you walk or bike safely to a local station, take a train or rapid bus for the long distance, and walk or bike the final mile. That combined ecosystem is the only mathematical way to break the radical monopoly of the car.
It sounds like a massive shift.
It is, and it requires engaging local communities to understand what actual everyday barriers they face, rather than just copy-pasting a bike lane design from Amsterdam into a totally different cultural and geographic context.
Right, because what works there might not work everywhere. So to pull all these threads together, walking and cycling aren't just quaint hobbies, and they aren't exercises in environmental martyrdom.
Definitely not.
The data clearly shows they are hyper-efficient, space-saving, life-extending modes of transport. But their true potential is currently being suppressed by a century-old built-in bias toward the automobile. A bias that dictates everything from how our brains visually process a street scene to how our government mathematically justifies spending billions on infrastructure.
Recognizing those invisible rules and seeing the street not as a permanent reality, but as a set of choices we made and can unmake, is really the first step toward designing cities for human beings rather than for machines.
So what does this all mean for you? I want to leave you with a final, lingering thought, building on that concept of Ivan Illich's radical monopoly. He pointed out that certain technologies become so dominant they completely alter your choices without your consent, making themselves compulsory just to live a normal life.
They blend right in.
Exactly. So as you go about your day to day, look around your routine, your home, your workplace, ask yourself, what other radical monopolies in your life have completely engineered your daily behavior, while successfully masking themselves as just the normal, unavoidable way the world works?
Once you understand how the game board was designed, you start seeing the rules everywhere.
Thank you so much for joining us on this deep dive. Next time you step out your front door onto that 100-year-old game board, we hope you view your neighborhood through an entirely new lens. Catch you next time.
Fair Jones